in your opinion, what are some pros to paleo based on your experiences and what you've done with your clients?
Yeah, definitely awareness around nutrient dense foods and looking at things like sourcing, which might not otherwise, come up. Thinking about, getting foods that are seasonal, that come from local farmers, and just eating closer to a whole foods diet would be the biggest benefit, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree on all those. I mean, there's not a lot of areas to say that's a bad that's a bad diet. But going into the cons of it, I do think that the way that some people approach it, because you did say, eating seasonal and varying your meats and rotating and all of that. But I think when human beings start to get into this mindset of I need to truncate down the amount of foods and the kinds of foods, whether that's quality, whatever the case is, um, amount of foods that I eat, they eat the same things over and over and over and over again. So, on the outside looking in, it's like, oh, paleo is so good. It's so nutrient dense. There's so many varieties of macros and micronutrients and all of that. But then you look at someone actually doing it and you look at their food logs for the last 3 months, and every single meal looks the same because they feel like it's such a restrictive diet. And you start to look at micronutrient profile and you're like, you've actually gotten no vitamin D through foods in the past 3 months. Not because paleo is a bad diet, but because of the foods that you chose to eat inside of this diet. Because in your head, you're like, this is challenging. I'm going to get my 10 staple foods and I'm just going to rotate those. And that's all I'm going to eat daily because it's easy. It's easier for me.
Yeah, I think it comes down to implementation, right? And that's going to be a common theme of discussion across all these pieces we talk about today. But it might seem like a great idea on paper, but it can create like maybe a little bit of fear mongering or concern that these foods are bad, so I have to do everything I can to avoid them. And I know these 10 foods are safe and it's easy and life is busy, so I don't have time to buy 100 different vegetables to choose from. So people do start to get restricted in how they implement it because they're like, okay, this is safe. I can follow the rules. I know this is right. I don't want to do what's wrong. And wrong is really just this arbitrary line that may have been drawn.
Yeah, and it can create a level of orthorexia as well, where people start to think a little bit too much about food quality and being so afraid to have something that they deem to be lower quality food. So orthorexia it's an eating disorder, right? The only difference is that your eating disorder is biasing these really high quality foods and you're unable to eat anything outside of that. So I experienced a version of that when I was going through that where, I would go to a restaurant and I'd ask the server like, oh, what kind of oil do you use in this thing? And they're like, well, we use, oil X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh, I can't eat that. Can I just have some steamed broccoli? And then can I have some butter? What kind of butter do you use? And they're like, well, it's like a 70-30 split. It's like 70% real butter, 30% oil. And I'm like, can't do that either. So I'm like at a restaurant eating broccoli with salt on it, and that's all I'm eating, right? So that's an eating disorder, right? Like that thing isn't going to kill me if I eat it, right? But you start to you start to build these habits of this quality food way of life, and it actually starts affecting your day to day. It affects you going out and having a good time with your friends or family, whatever the case may be. So it is an eating disorder.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm thinking now about the dairy thing and the high fat, high quality organic dairy. I remember being probably about like 19, fully into paleo, and my mom bought low fat yogurt, and I was like, I can't eat that, mom. I'm not going to eat the low fat yogurt. I only eat the high fat organic yogurt, like, or full fat. You're crazy. I can't eat that. it's funny to sit back and look at now, but again, diets that are like only focused on quality, only focused on quantity, whatever way you go, they do create, dogmatic thinking.
Yeah.
And it, causes the individual who is following them to lose their ability to think critically about what is it that actually fuels my mental acuity,
Mm-hmm.
helps me live longer, large and long, and, helps me have great function on a daily basis, because again, you're just following like the black and white rules of what's written down. One positive I'll go back to for like a paleo or kind of like a Whole 30, which would be a strict paleo
Mm-hmm.
approach that I've seen with clients, would be, and I saw you wrote this down, like a kind of a semi-elimination diet where people
Hmm.
can create a bit of awareness around foods that may or may not be problematic for them. So I can think of an example where I had a client go through eliminating dairy, grains, refined sugar and oils, and caffeine for a period of time because of some digestive issues. And she took them out, slowly reintroduced things like on a protocol, and she did notice issues with caffeine in the AM and then dairy throughout the day, causing some like stuffiness, red nose, like itchy throat, things like that. So it can help people create awareness around things like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think where people run into issues is when they feel like they can never add them back in. And when we start to look at really restricting yourself um, from a dietary aspect outside of having sensitivities or having actual allergic reactions from certain foods, we stop developing the enzymes to break certain foods down as well, right? So you see it very often where someone eliminates something like gluten for like very strictly eliminates gluten for 3 years, and they've had no sensitivities to it, or they've had no issues, and then when they try to reintroduce it, now it makes them sick because their bodies aren't able to process that. So there's always a level in my head of like being able to have some kind of resilience to those bad foods, where it's like if it slips its way into a salad dressing in a restaurant, it doesn't take you out for 2 days. So I think that's another con where with paleo and sticking to it um, for no reason, essentially, right? It's like I'm just going to do this because this book or this person told me that these are higher quality foods, and I'm never going to put anything else in my body that doesn't fall within this bucket.
Yeah, I get it. What about the science? Like, what does the science say around a paleo diet? Has Because it is fairly like recent, the
Hmm.
popularity around it. Have there been many studies done on benefits of a paleo diet?
Yeah, there's been a few. A lot of these studies are actually they're actually looking at the differences between high quality versus low quality foods, with all other things being equal. And we'll talk about this when we hit if it fits your macros. But one that I pulled was from Gotti et al. 2019, and it was all positive, right? It was like we have this subset of people that are on this very strict paleo diet. Calories are equal to this other subset of people that are not on a paleo diet, and what the people saw on the paleo side was a decrease in body fat mass. They saw a decrease in systolic and diastolic blood pressure, and they felt good, right? The thing that we always have to be weary of is like, where did this group come from and where did this group come from? Because if this group that went into the paleo protocol is eliminating a bunch of just terrible foods for them, and it's jacking up their metabolic rates and stuff like that, and then they're adding these high quality whole foods, how does that affect the metabolic system? And there actually wasn't a huge change or a huge shift in metabolic rates. It was just essentially these things just happened, and there were no answers. They're just like, we actually don't know why it happened. It just happened. So when we start to look at, what are some possible reasons and causes, it's like, was inflammation down, right? If inflammation is down, we can talk about a million things downstream that are going to be effective in a positive way. So, yeah, I mean, when we look at the science, it does say that it could be better than a low quality diet. But now we look at subsets of studies of like, is it health? Is it performance? Is it acuity? Is it so each one of those studies is going to say something a little bit different based on what they're looking at. Because if we're looking at performance in a very short period of time, the science is going to say that paleo is the same as a low quality diet, as long as you're getting volume of calories and fuel, and you're getting volume of carbohydrate in. Um, so yeah, and I mean, we didn't mention that, but that's another con, right? It's really tough to get uh, let's call it high quality carbohydrates in large quantities. So like an athlete, for instance, that needs 300 or 400 grams of carbs, it's going to be hard for them to get that through sweet potato and vegetables.
It's a lot of fiber. It's going to jack up someone's digestive system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, guys, in the description in the show notes, we'll link off to any studies that are referenced so you guys can check them out and have a read if you'd like to. One other thing just to consider as we move forward in the conversation is that with all studies, they're only done for a limited period of time, and you get the data that is relevant to the study, but you don't get to talk to every one of the individuals and talk about, how did this nutrition affect your emotional state? How did you feel about the food you were eating? Because obviously nutrition is not just about, numbers. There are a lot of qualitative factors that go into deciding yes or no, is this a good nutrition protocol for my client?
Yeah, and it's, we need to have the opportunity to look at where these people are in a decade as well, because, most studies are 8, 12, 16 weeks, and then, the people are out, so it's checking back in on those people a year from now, because we all see people that go through nutrition challenges and very short-term changes, and they see these awesome benefits and some awesome results, and then those results fade away over time, because they can't adhere to it, or maybe the magic really wasn't there in the diet. It was just because they changed something, or the fitness program, they just changed something and their bodies had to adapt to it. But if we look at them a year from now or 10 years from now, it's like, where are they now?
Yeah, until we have lifelong studies on some of these diets, we're never going to be able to compare our definition of, highest order nutrition, i.e. supporting someone living large and long from the age of 15 till the age of 85. So you just really can't compare the two directly.
Yep.